Thank you, Doctor. It's such a pleasure to be here. And it's particularly exciting to be here, at a place like NAFS. I have read about the work of Professor Cyril in really propelling forward so much of the work of astrobiology and the origin of life, and it's inspired to be in a place where that has started so much of that work. So thank you so much for your hospitality and for the assistance of the U.S. Embassy and for all of you for being here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just kind of some of the things that NASA is doing, and then talk about some of the projects that we have in astrobiology, exploring, looking for life throughout the universe. And so NASA, as you may know, is the U.S. space agency, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And it's the largest space agency in the world and the first space agency founded in 1958. And we've worked on so many different projects. The greatest hits list is pretty long, but here's a couple of them. So we have, for instance, the Hubble Space Telescope. Hubble Space Telescope launched in 1990. It was the first large space telescope. And the point of putting a space telescope is there not that it's huge, but it's above the Earth's atmosphere. And so you can see here, it's above the clouds and above the atmosphere. And so you can take some of these well-known pictures like this at a level of sharpness, which is impossible to do from the ground. And like many projects, Hubble is so large, not just one country alone can do it. So Hubble is a collaboration with the ESA, the European Space Agency, because international collaboration is so important to the work that NASA does. 3 years ago, we put up the James Webb Space Telescope, and this is in some ways the follow-up to Hubble. So it's a larger mirror, 6 meters across, and it looks in the thermal, in the infrared, and that essentially helps us look backward in time, because a lot of the stuff that was formed in the early solar system is much more visible in the infrared than in the visible. And so you can also look through dust much more easily at infrared wavelengths. And so we have this is the Hubble image of one area, and this is the James Webb image of the same thing. And so you're looking at different aspects of what you can study. Yeah. Hubble's James Webb also has a connection to Sri Lanka, that it was launched on the equator from Equatorial Guinea by the European Space Agency. And I was talking with a high school student in Tangal that evening, and he's like, I was out there looking for the comet, and I saw this thing going overhead, and it wasn't a comet. It was actually the James Webb Space Telescope, because it was launched on the equator, because that's the part of the Earth that's moving the fastest. So they launched it on the equator, and it was visible from right over Tangal. So that was really exciting I didn't see it, but this secondary student saw it as it was going into orbit. NASA also has the Mars rovers. We've sent up 5 Mars rovers. Their job is to look for the history of habitability, the history of life, or the possibility that there could be life on Mars. And so we started off small, with the Sojourner rover in about 1996, 1997. And then the Spirit and Opportunity rovers. And now we have 2 which are operating. This is one called Curiosity, and then we have the Perseverance rover, which is operating also. And their job is to just search for the history of water, the chemistry of water on the surface of Mars, habitability all across the surface of Mars. I'll come back to them in a little bit. I was involved with the New Horizons mission to Pluto. So this is the first spacecraft to go all the way out in the solar system and look at Pluto for the very first time. Pluto is so far away that with the Hubble Space Telescope, Pluto is just 1 pixel across. You can't resolve it at all. It's just one single pixel across with Hubble. With the New Horizons spacecraft, we take a small spacecraft and we fly it out to Pluto. And so we can see much closer, higher resolution. And so this is what we have. This is Pluto. And we can see this this is about 5,000 pixels across rather than 1 pixel across. And so we're really rediscovering what the outer solar system is like. And so I was involved in this mission for 15 years. We have the Parker Solar Probe mission, which you may have heard of. So Parker Solar Probe is, all of the energy that, all of the energy, all of the light, all of the heat that we have in the solar system, essentially, in one way or another, comes ultimately from the sun. And so we're really interested in the physics inside the sun, and the physics in particular of the corona, which is the outer atmosphere of the sun. That's what the Parker Solar Probe is studying. And so this probe is coming closer to the sun than any other spacecraft has ever come. It actually gets about 5 million kilometers away from the sun. So it's about 97% of the way to the sun from us. It had its closest pass about a month ago as it was going just over the top of the sun, at 5 million kilometers. Of course, NASA, the first big project that NASA worked on in the 1960s, the Apollo missions, where we sent astronauts to the moon, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. And we have an upcoming program called Artemis, where we're actually sending astronauts back to the moon. So up until now, most of the work that NASA has done exploring the solar system is not using robots, or not using humans, because robots are easier, right? Because we don't want to send a human out to Pluto, because that's going to take 15 years to get out there, 9 years to get out there. And humans you have to feed them, you have to water them, humans get tired. So it's much, much easier to use robots. But the moon is close, it's easy, and sometimes we want to send humans out there. So we're sending, this is actually the astronauts that we're sending back to the moon. They're going to go up in about 2027 or so. And the first woman and first person of color to be walking on the moon. And so there's hundreds of other projects that NASA's worked on. You can find them on the NASA website right there. Things exploring, there's many NASA missions which are exploring the Earth from ground cover satellites, ocean satellites, sea level satellites, geopositioning satellites, to studying the sun, to studying the moon, to the solar system and the stars, the galaxy, the universe, and beyond. One of the things which I think is the greatest thing about NASA is the mission statement here: we reach for new heights and reveal the unknown for the benefit of humankind. And so NASA, of course, is not a company. NASA is funded by the U.S. government. NASA's job, just like your job, is to do research for the benefit of humanity. And so all of NASA's results are available for anybody to download anywhere around the world. So anybody in Sri Lanka can download all of the data from NASA's terrestrial satellites, and from from the Hubble Space Telescope, and from images like Landsat, from the Mars rovers. All of the data, all of the measurements, all of the videos, everything is available for free for anybody in Sri Lanka, anybody in India, anybody in Australia, anybody around the world can download all of NASA's data for free. And the collaborations between NASA and other countries are so important. We have collaborations with almost 50 different countries, different space agencies around the world, and it's so because international collaboration is such an important part of what all of us do. Okay, so I'm going to talk about astrobiology, and the question that a lot of people ask when I talk about astrobiology is whether whether aliens exist. And so you just raise your hand. You think there's life elsewhere in the universe? Right on. Yeah. I think there's probably life elsewhere in the universe too. And the reason I think is that if you look at just in the Milky Way galaxy, we've got 100 billion stars in our galaxy. We've got 100 billion galaxies in the universe. We have 10 planets around every star. Put those together as 10 to the 23 different planets. And so I think just statistically, there's so many other planets out there that one of those at least has life out there. It's just such a huge number. All right, next poll question. Have we ever found any aliens? So raise your hand if you've seen an alien, on the way to work today. Anybody seen an alien today? Yesterday? Any aliens? Like, where are they? So, no, we keep looking, right? We keep looking, and we've never found anything. And we've never found any life beyond Earth. No aliens on Mars. No bacteria on asteroids. No bacteria falling onto Earth from space. No confirmed radio signals, nothing at all. We've never found any life anywhere in the universe except for here on Earth. And so what's going on? So the question really is like, and it's sort of the biggest question in all of science, is are we alone? Kind of all of humanity. Are we alone? And you can break it down. Is our solar system unique? Probably not. There's probably lots and lots of other solar systems. We've found more than 5,000 other solar systems. Is Earth unique? Probably not. We've found a handful of other planets, which they're not identical to Earth, but they're kind of the same size, kind of the same temperature, sort of the same stuff going on as Earth. We haven't visited them. They're a long way away, but we know they exist. And is life on Earth unique? That's the question that we really don't know the answer to. And so, if you go back in time, if you go back 500 years or 1,000 years, we used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe. And we had the Earth here, and we had the sun going around the Earth, and we had the moon going around the Earth, and we had the stars going around the Earth, because we thought we were at the center of everything. And the more we look out, the more we see that the universe is bigger, and we're not at the center of it. And so, the larger the universe becomes. So now we've found dozens and dozens of other planets, other planetary systems, or thousands of other planetary systems. And the more we look, the more we see that we're not at the center, and we're not that special, and we're not that unique. And so we have kind of this tiny corner of the universe that we're in. And our region isn't particularly special. It's not particularly unique. And there's billions of other planets, billions of other stars in the galaxy. And probably many of those are very similar to our own. And so there's so many places. If we want to look for life, we want to go around and we want to find some life somewhere. The universe, we have all these 10 to the 23 planets. We can't look at all of them. We need to narrow down our search somehow. And so we want to, how do we narrow down our search? Basically, we need to know how to define life. I define life as just, the complex chemistry, the most complex chemical processes that we can come up with. There's no chemical processes that we've come up with that are more complicated than life. So how do you make complex chemistry? And in the universe, just speaking broadly, if you want to make complex chemistry, there's a couple of things. Use easy to find ingredients. So some of our favorite elements, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen. We see these, all over Earth, but not just all over Earth. We see all of these all over the whole universe. So even if we look in the most distant stellar system, the most distant planetary systems that we can detect, we see that they're dominated by more or less the same things that we're dominated by. Lots of hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen. And so you can count up how much of everything there is. This is on the log scale. So hydrogen by far is the most common thing in the universe. Helium is number 2, but helium doesn't do any chemistry with anything, so it doesn't really count. But after that is carbon and oxygen and nitrogen. And so those are the most common elements. And so if you want to make complex chemistry, it's not a surprise that you want to base it on these common elements. Also, if you want to make complex chemistry, do it in liquids. So you don't have much chemistry that's going on in solids, right? Because the molecules are just too locked in place. In gases, the molecules are too far apart, so there's not much chemistry. So that's why most chemistry happens in liquids. So we've got easy to find ingredients and liquids. Water is the most common liquid in the whole universe, and that's because hydrogen and oxygen are the most common. And so if you're looking for water, we actually see water all over the place in the universe. It's not always liquid water. A lot of times it's frozen in ice or it's in gas, but we see H2O all over the place in the universe. And then if you want to do complex chemistry, let it evolve, you want to do it at the right temperature. If you do it too hot, then everything breaks apart. If you do it too cold, everything's frozen, there's no chemistry. So there's kind of a sweet spot, kind of where the temperature of the Earth is. 300 kelvins or so, where probably chemistry is encouraged the most. 300, 400 kelvins. And so if you take these things and you summarize those, you take those all together, basically, the search for life is the search for liquid water. So if we want to search for life in the universe, what we need to do, our shortcut, is just to search for the places that we can find liquid water. And in fact, there's never been any form of life that we found that isn't based on liquid water. So all bacteria have some. It's got lenses. It's got all the sorts of things that you would do as a geologist walking around the surface of Mars, but it doesn't remotely. Also, what it's doing is taking samples from the surface of Mars and of the most interesting rocks. And so it actually has space for about 40 rocks that it can store. It drills 4 samples of them, about the size of a large pencil. And it's going to cache these so that we can hopefully bring them back in the future with what we call the Mars sample return. And so with that, we'll be able to use, the SEMs and every other, nanosims, every other sort of laboratory technique on Earth to study these Mars rocks in a way that we can't do using the instruments that are actually on board the rover itself. So that's the Mars sample return. We haven't flown it yet. It's a really complicated mission to actually go up to Mars, retrieve those rocks, and bring them back. But that's what we're looking forward to doing. So the rover, every day it kind of goes around here. Each of these symbols here is where it's cached, one of its samples. And so the follow-up mission can take those and collect those cache samples and bring them back here. And the region that the Mars rover is driving around in is this area called Jezero Crater right here. Miguel Crater. And Jezero Crater. And so, the reason why we're going to, it's not this is, the water has been added there. There's no water there now, right? But 3 billion years ago, there was water there. And now it's dry and dead. But the reason why we're going to this lake is this dry lake bed. Like I was out at Udawallaray a couple of months ago, and it's beautiful out there, and you have the big lake, and the wind is blowing, and like everything gets blown into the lake, right? So the branches get blown into the lake, and the dust gets blown into the lake, and every sort of history, every object which is sort of documenting the biological history of the area gets thrown into the lake, and so the lake bed kind of builds up with sediment over years. And tells you the history of what was going on in the area, pollens and plants and everything. And so the same thing is happening at Mars. So you can learn about the geological history or the biological history, the chemical history of Mars by what's deposited in these ancient lake beds. And so we have this crater. It's been there for 3 billion years. You have material which is blown in there and builds up sediment layers over 3 billion years. So now we come later, and we take our Mars rover, and every day it drives up through the different layers on Mars. And that's how we explore the history of what's going on Mars. And, some of these images I just love because, this looks like mudstone, and, it's a meter across. And it's sort of exactly what you would see like out at Udawallaray, where, it looks like it was a kind of a nice sunny warm day, and it was mud, and then it dried out, and now you have, sand that's deposited on top of it. So the analogies between Mars and Earth are really, really very direct. So, and it's the closest one, the easiest one to get to. And so it makes a lot of sense that we have all this interest in going to Mars to explore it. Okay, so that's Mars. Number 2 is Europa. So we've got Jupiter here. Jupiter's right overhead last night. In fact, I had a telescope here. I was looking at it with some students last night. You can see Jupiter, and you can see its 4 moons going around it. So we saw Europa last night through a small telescope. We've had these 4 big moons, and Europa is the one that we're most interested in. And the reason why is this is what Europa looks like. So kind of like this is an image of the near the North Pole, North ice sheet on the Earth. And so you see all these icebergs here and the ice flows. Same thing's happening on Europa. And so these are this is about 30 kilometers across. And so you can see all these icebergs, and they're just kind of floating on the surface of the ocean there. Now, in this case at Europa, right now the ocean is frozen. So we don't actually see liquid water there, but we can see that it was liquid pretty recently, maybe in the last, million, 10 million, something like that years. I don't know exactly the date. But it's a very much an analog to what's going on like in the north, toward the North Pole region of the Earth. They've got ice on top. and then the water layer below it. And we actually can sample the water layer at some points because we have plumes, geysers coming up through squeezing water through the ice sheet, and then come out into space. So we can actually sample and we can see some of the plumes from the ice and from the ocean coming out there. And so what's going on here is we've got this ice layer, and then we have this ocean layer right here, and then below that we have the core of Europa. And there's enough heat still being produced by the core that it keeps it from freezing. So you might think, being a small moon, that the whole thing would eventually cool off and freeze, but there's enough heat coming from the core that it keeps the ocean maintained even over billions of years. And so, right here, it's a pretty direct analogy to what's happening in parts of the ocean on the Earth. We think that there's a lot of interest in the origins of life and the hot sea, the hot ocean vents on the Earth. And as a warm region for chemistry to happen and bacteria to evolve and so forth. And so it might well be that in the ocean here, we've got coral and whale sharks and octopus and plankton. And it could be that if we go up to Europa, we've got also coral and whale sharks and octopus and plankton below the surface, below the ice in that ocean there. It could be that we have nothing at all. It could be that we have life forms that are completely different, not related at all to Earth. But that's why we're interested in going there. We're so interested in going there that NASA has a mission to go out there. It's called the Europa Clipper mission. The European Space Agency also has a mission which is going out there. It's called JUICE, the Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer. They both launched recently. And so this is a solar-powered spacecraft. So these are the solar cells right here. Huge solar cells, about 30 meters across on the solar cells. This is the magnetometer here. This is the antenna spacecraft here. And so it's orbiting Jupiter, or it will orbit Jupiter. And then it'll send back data primarily from Europa right here. And its job is to study Europa, study the ocean, study the ice sheet. It's not a lander. We don't know where to land yet. So in the future we would want to send a lander there, but we want to study it from orbit first before we actually are ready to land there. So this launched in October, about 4 months ago. Super exciting to see this thing launch. It takes 5 years to get out to Jupiter, so really going to be excited to tune in for that arrival when it gets there. Okay, one last place is Titan. So Titan is the largest moon of Saturn, and in fact, it's the closest moon to the Earth in terms of its composition and its physics and its chemistry and what's going on there. So we visited Titan one time before. We had the Cassini mission. It was a NASA and European Space Agency mission, and it actually put a lander on the surface of Titan, and it took some images as it was going down. And so all of these images are from Cassini or from Huygens. And so what we know about Titan is that it has this really, really thick atmosphere. In fact, it's hard to see through the atmosphere. It's much thicker than the Earth's atmosphere, much cloudier than the Earth's atmosphere. And but what it has below it, to get there, it's got lakes, it has sand dunes, it has mountains, it has valleys, it has oceans, rainstorms, tons and tons of complex organic chemistry happening in the atmosphere. It's very cold. So typical temperature there is, like negative 200 Celsius. And so all of the water, so there's a difference here. It's not water-based chemistry because all the water is frozen. These are boulders made of frozen water ice right here. We see lakes, we see oceans, we see rainstorms, but it's not water. It's actually ethane and methane, which are providing essentially the hydrocarbons, or the water cycle on Mars is really a hydrocarbon cycle. On Titan, I'm sorry. So the chemistry is different, but the rest of what's going on Titan is super complex and could be a good kind of like parallel to what's going on Earth. So we have a mission, and we're working on building this thing right now. It's called the Dragonfly mission, and it's actually an octocopter. It's a drone. And so what's going to happen is it's going to launch in 2028. It's going to get to Saturn on just a normal rocket. Once it gets to Saturn, gets to Titan, then its aeroshell pops off here, and it uses its parachute to gently descend toward the surface, and then when it's on the surface, it can use its propellers to fly around. And so it can study Titan from right here, and then it can take off, cruise around, land 1 kilometer away or 10 kilometers away, and study Titan from the air, and then move to different regions to study it from the ground in all those different places. And one of Dragonfly's big jobs is really going to be to investigate the chemistry happening on the surface of Titan and the complex chemistry in the atmosphere, and whether that could be related to either biology, or prebiotic chemistry, or habitation in the past on Titan. All of these things are a big interest in why we're going up to Titan. So it's really the search for life which is motivating this mission and the other missions that we're looking at. So that's our solar system. Those are the three best places to look for life in our solar system that we're jumping into right now. And there's many other places beyond our solar system that I mentioned, exoplanets. So we've got more than 5,000 planets around other stars that we've also discovered. All these are much, much further away. Even the closest star, like Proxima Centauri, if you want to send a spacecraft out there, at the rate that we can send our spacecraft out there now, it's going to take 50,000 years to send a spacecraft out, even to the closest planet. So we can't visit the other stars. We can't visit the other planets. What we can do is study them remotely. We can study them with James Webb Space Telescope or Hubble Space Telescope or large ground-based telescopes. Those are all good, but we can't visit them in the same way that we can visit the things in our solar system. And that's the big difference there. Now, there's some things that we can visit in person to look for the origin of life. For instance, if you go over to India, this is the Lonar crater in Maharashtra, outside of Aurangabad. And this crater is a pretty good analogy to the crater which the Perseverance rover is driving around in on Mars. And so got this crater filled with water here. Here's the real thing filled with water. This is in the same type of rock. So this is basalt. It's a basaltic rock here. Mars has volcanoes, so it's a basaltic rock composition on Jezero crater as well. And so it's an impact crater. It's basalt. It's filled with water. And so this system that we see on Earth is a pretty good analog, or the best analogy that we have to the systems that we see in many cases across Mars as well. So we can study the chemistry of some of these origins of life throughout the universe by studying the Earth. Okay, I've got a short video here about the Mars Perseverance rover and how we Mars Curiosity rover and how we actually take this rover and get it out there to Mars. That's a couple minutes, and then we'll wrap up after that. And if we can have the audio on here. Do we have audio coming up for the HDMI?
When people look at it.
So any way to get the audio on? Well, this is subtitled here.
It is the result of regenerating solar tree. The top of the atmosphere, down to the surface, it takes us 7 minutes. It takes 14 minutes or so for the signal from the spacecraft to make it to Earth. That's how far Mars is away from us. So when we first get word that we've touched the top of the atmosphere, the vehicle has been live or dead on the surface for 7 minutes.
Entry descent landing, also known as EDL, are referred to as the 7 minutes of terror, because we've got literally 7 minutes to get from the top of the atmosphere to the surface of Mars, going from 13,000 miles an hour to 0. In perfect sequence, perfect choreography, perfect timing, and the computer has to do it all by itself with no help there. If any one thing doesn't work just right, it's game over.
We slam into the atmosphere, develop so much aerodynamic drag, our air shape. It heats up and it glows like the surface of the sun. 1,600 degrees.
During entry, the vehicle is not only slowing down violently through the atmosphere, but also we are guiding like an airplane to be able to land in a very narrow constrained space. This is one of the biggest challenges that we're facing, and one that we have never attempted on Mars.
Mars is actually really hard to slow down because it has just enough atmosphere that you have to deal with. Otherwise, it will destroy your spacecraft. On the other hand, it doesn't have enough atmosphere to finish the job. And we're still going about 1,000 miles an hour. So at that point, we use a parachute.
The parachute is the largest and strongest supersonic parachute that we've ever built to date. It has to be able to withstand 65,000 pounds of force, even though the parachute itself only weighed about 100 pounds.
When it opens up that fast, it's a neck snapping 9 Gs.
At that point, we have to get that heat shield off. It's like a big lens cap blocking our view of the ground to the radar. The radar has to take just the right altitude and velocity measurements at just the right time for the rest of the landing sequence will work.
This big, huge parachute that we've got, it only slows down to about 200 miles an hour. That's not slow enough to land. So we had no choice but to play it off and come down in rockets. Once we turn those rocket motors on, we don't do something. We just smack right back into the parachute. So first thing we do is this really radical thing. We fly off to the side.
Diverting away from the parachute, killing our horizontal velocity and our vertical velocity. This room, we're moving straight up and down, so we'll at the surface with this radar, see where we're going to land, and we'll get straight down to the bottom of the crater, right beside a 6-kilometer line.
We can't get those rocket engines too close to the ground because if we were to descend pulsively, our engines all the way to the ground, we would essentially create this massive dust cloud. The dust cloud would then go and land on the rover. It could damage mechanisms, it could damage instruments. So the way we solved that problem is by using the sky crane.
20 meters above the surface. You have to lower the rover below us on a tether. It's 21 feet long, and then gently deposit on its wheels on the surface.
As the rover touches down and is now on the ground, the descent stage is a repulsion force with a rover and must cut the bridle immediately and fly the descent stage to a safe distance from.
I kind of get like shivers every time I see that. It's like so cool that we can build a spacecraft and have it, take it up to Mars and get it there, and then it's been operating there for almost 15 years now. So exciting. So let's say that we do find we do find life on Mars or on Titan or on Europa. And the question is, where did it come from? And there's sort of two different ways that we know to make life, and we don't have any idea whether life on Earth was made one way or the other way. So the first is just that you can build from scratch. You start with the Earth was built and you have atoms on it, and the atoms turn into molecules, the molecules turn into organic molecules. Organic molecules go into amino acids turn into DNA, and DNA goes into life. Some of these steps are really easy, right? This is the hard part right here, going from amino acids into DNA. This is the sort of thing that Professor Cyril was involved in, is all of this chain here. We've never done this in the lab. It's still extraordinarily complicated. DNA is extremely complicated and long, and we've never come anywhere close to doing this step. And there's another completely different way that we might be, which is also, for instance, what Vikram Singh was looking at. As we know, the Earth gets hit. The Earth is not isolated. The Earth gets hit by 40 tons of material every time you see a shooting star. That's material from another planet, or a comet, or an asteroid, or a protoplanet, or another stellar system, another planetary system, which is coming to Earth. We get hit by 40 tons of that every day, and it's reasonable to think that some of that is not just inert material, but if there's biotic material, organic molecules, microbes riding along, you can easily seed life from one planetary system to another planetary system to the transfer man. So that's what I have for you. This is a really exciting time to be involved in the field of astrobiology. There's so much exciting work being done on it around the world, and I look forward to discussing it with you. So thank you so much for having me here.